You would think that terrible abuse by a partner would always make a person pull away and set a boundary and protect themselves. But for some reason, humans are wired with this little glitch that makes us vulnerable to trauma bonding. Now, trauma bonding, which is also called intermittent reinforcement, happens when someone close to you is sometimes loving and wonderful and sometimes hateful and abusive. You never know what you're going to get. But for whatever reason, that on-off pattern, on-off, on-off, instead of pushing you to shut down or flee the abuse, it tricks your mind into holding on tighter. This can happen to anyone, but it happens especially often to those of us who were abused as kids by someone we trusted, someone we depended on. They were kind, they helped us, and then bam, they turned around and hurt us. They were kind and loving, and then bam, they turn around and hurt us. They kind, hurt. They go back and forth. It's easy to spot in other people when they're hooked into this trauma bond. When they do it, you can think of what's called battered partner syndrome, where someone goes back again and again to an abuser. And what you notice from the outside is that they seem irrational. One minute they're very clear their partner's abusive and they gotta leave, and then this switch flips. You can see it happen. And they believe their partner is really good and they can't resist the urge to go back to them. And if this has happened to you, you know how hard it is to perceive when it's happening. It's like a monster hijacks your brain. You can't think, you can't reason. And in effect, it is like a monster. But because you can recognize the pattern in another person, you can learn to recognize it in yourself. And to help you with that, I wanted to share a letter I received from a man I'll call James, who is right now mentally and emotionally trapped in a trauma bond. And he writes, "Hi, Anna. After watching your videos and starting therapy, I've realized my own CPTSD and how it affects me daily. I was abused by athletic coaches when I was young, both sexually and mentally. There then was a massive shift at home where problems with my older sister resulted in me feeling like her protector from my dad and family. This resulted in an abusive relationship physically with my dad, and the only way we would communicate would be verbal fights. I never felt love or connection to him or my family. During this time, I was struggling with my own sexuality and my sense of belonging." All right, I'm going to use my fairy pen. I'm going to circle some things I want to come back to when I go through a second time. First, I'm just going to read it through, then I'm going to come back and see if I can help you, James. Here we go. "So over the years," James writes, "I've floated through life and never really accomplished or achieved much. I'm a massive people pleaser and have been drawn to people who remind me of my home life. Past relationships have had alcohol issues, drugs, and cheating partners. I always find that I'm obsessed with the relationships at the start and move extremely quickly in every sense, losing full connection to myself and only seeing the value of the other person. This then shifts when something bad happens. I see all the problems within the relationship and believe it is not good, and I show avoidant behavior. I've recently had a relationship finish. We met last year on a dating app. He was honest, hardworking, and seemed secure. He had 2 children, which for me never seemed an option since I'm gay. I was open to the idea, but also scared that I would become like my dad and how he treated me. I tried so hard to prove myself at the beginning of the relationship as we lived some distance apart. He didn't like my job in hospitality and wanted me to leave. He would often get annoyed when we didn't communicate each night. The communication got more and more intense, and I felt now he would love bomb, and I felt the need to say back quickly I felt the same, when at that point I actually wasn't ready. I then agreed to move to his area and get a new job. This was great, but the cracks for me started to show. I felt the relationship for me was that I was just a distraction for him. He drank too much and he loved to drink. I often joined in when I didn't want to. I felt scared bringing up my reservations about his drinking and of moving in and general aspects of his behavior. When I did, I noticed his annoyance at me. He had a temper, and at first it was directed at other people, but when he had a drink, it would be directed at me. I felt very lonely when I lived with him. He would call me in the morning when he went to work, and I would feel rushed and pressured to answer. We would speak at lunch, and then he would pick me up from the gym after work. Our lives started to feel at one, but it felt codependent to me, and I raised those fears to him. I felt through our relationship that we had trauma bonded even from our first date, but it didn't feel like there was much substance there. I doubt myself because all I see is the negatives from it, from my avoidant tendencies. But it wasn't all bad. He was caring and showed up for me, especially when he didn't drink. But that would change when he drank. He would hate it if we were out and I talked to a friend and wasn't paying attention to him. He would talk to me with snarled teeth and shout at me in front of my friends. My friends had seen a side to him which they had not voiced to me, that he was not right for me until later, after another blow-up. He had said to me the worst fear of mine and my biggest self-limiting belief, and that was that I am damaged goods. That hurt. And from that point on, I couldn't see him in the same way. He apologized and tried to improve, but I was hurt and I couldn't get past it. I started to feel like my parents' relationship was happening for me now. We didn't have much to say because of the constant habitual way of communicating, and we would drink and talk about trauma as basically our only bond. But I love him. I moved out of his home after my surprise birthday. My friends and family all voiced their concerns and said that they didn't think he was the best person for me after they witnessed a fight that happened after I mentioned an ex. He felt that I was ignoring all good things he did and that he wasn't being validated for all he did. The fight caused me to pack my things and leave. I felt I did this more to please my friends and family rather than it being my own decision. We then went long distance and both sought out therapy. This then brought back all the things from my childhood, and I started to get very dysregulated. I became my withdrawn and depressed self and felt smothered by him and the pressure of he was putting on me about when was I going to move back. I now see that he is an anxious type, and I just couldn't handle it. At times I wanted to end my life and have had those thoughts before. I kept pushing him away and broke up with him over the phone. This then led to a break. I found clarity, and I wanted to make things work with him. I told him this, but he said I had hurt him too many times and that I hurt him the most out of anyone he'd ever known. He couldn't trust me or trust that I really wanted this relationship. He then ended things. I've placed myself on no contact, but I want the relationship to work, and I worry I've lost something good. I have some of his belongings, and I just don't know what to do. Thanks so much, James. All right, James. This sounds really hard, and I'm really glad you're on your own right now. I hope that since you wrote to me, this hasn't changed, because I think I can help you. All right, we're going to go through your letter again. I'm just going to highlight things that you told me about the situation. All right. So you've been watching my videos, you've been doing therapy, and you realized you have CPTSD. That's a big thing to realize, and I'm glad you're working on it. And how it affects you daily. That your athletic coaches abused you sexually and mentally when you were a kid. I'm so sorry. And also that your dad abused you. And the only way you communicated was with verbal fights. Never felt love or connection to him or your family. So I guess there was nobody to help you when you were getting abused by the coach. I'm just so sorry. This is such a perfect storm for somebody to develop attachment wounds that are going to make it so hard to just land in a healthy relationship. But it's never too late. It's never too late to start healing and changing. So let's go through what you've been going through. So you say over the years you floated through life, you never really accomplished or achieved very much. You're a people pleaser. That's really common for somebody who was abused by a parent. You try to just not get abused, and that's how you learned how to do life. So it's really understandable, and it's really good you have awareness of that. And you've been drawn to people who remind you of your home life. Past relationships have had alcohol problems, drug problems, and cheating partners. I'm so sorry again. How miserable for you. You know, one of the things I'm going to tell you in this is I'm going to tell you that it's time for you to write down what you really want. And what I suggest to you is you do what I did back in the day, is you put down alcohol problems, drug problems, and cheating partners on the no-go zone. These are people you do not date, all right? These are behaviors you do not tolerate. I always find that I'm obsessed with the relationships at the start and move extremely quickly. That's another CPTSD thing. In every sense, I lose full connection to myself and only see the value of the other person. Right, okay. That's like codependence. It's really normal. Everything that you're describing about what you're struggling with are just like a really normal pattern of what happens to a whole, intact young person when they get treated abusively, okay? So there's nothing wrong with you. You're having normal symptoms of somebody who was raised under abnormal conditions. So then you say, this shifts when something bad happens. You see all the problems within the relationship and believe it's no good, and then you show avoidant behavior. So a little bit I'm going to question when you say avoidant behavior. I think that sort of refers to people, maybe some part of you is actually, it's not avoidant, it's just logical and sane that when somebody treats you badly that you pull back. Avoidance is more like somebody who does that for no reason. If you're doing it for a reason, you're just being sane, okay? So I wouldn't pathologize yourself for pulling away when something bad happens. But I get the picture you're painting. You rush in, it's so great, something bad happens, you pull back. Okay, it's better than not pulling back. I've recently had a relationship end, and we met on a dating app. He was honest, hardworking, and seemed secure. He had 2 children. That was new. You were afraid, though, that you would become like your dad, and that wouldn't be good, right? And you tried so hard to prove yourself at the beginning of the relationship because you lived some distance apart. And he didn't like your job in hospitality. Okay, right there, big red flag. He's dating you at the beginning and he doesn't like your job and wants you to change yourself. That is a super red flag of a controlling person, of somebody who has the expectation that they get to decide who you are and what you do to suit some idea they have of what they want, not who you are. They're not getting to know you. They're trying to reshape you and through criticism of some fantasy they have of who they're with. And this guy doesn't sound like any picnic, so, it just kind of makes me mad that he thinks you need to change. Of course, like all of us who are healing, we are working on changing, but we're working on changing by what we think is best for ourselves. This is not something that can be dictated by other people, by us. That is wrong. Okay. So he wanted you to quit that job and to get annoyed when you didn't communicate every night. Again, red flag, controlling behavior. This is like a precursor to flat out abuse, right? It's also kind of a narcissistic behavior. The communication got more and more intense, and you felt that what he was doing was love bombing, and you would feel the need to say back really quick, oh yeah, I love you too, even though that's not how you felt. You were people pleasing. And that's a pretty, that feels like, that's very hostagey, to feel like you have to say you love him just so he won't be mad. That's not love, honey. That is just not love. But then you agreed to move to his area and get a new job. So that was going on, but this part of you that has CPTSD was like, I know, I'll cut off all my independent life and I'll move to his area and I'll get a new job. This was great, but the cracks started to show, and that's your pattern, right? Like finally you start to see what the problem is. I felt a relationship for me was that I was just a distraction for him. He drank too much and would love to drink. So when you say distraction for him, I think you mean he didn't see you. He couldn't have genuine love for you. He was basically just trying to get out of his own pain. And I believe he had pain because he was drinking all the time. And then you'd often drink when you didn't want to. So now you're saying, I love you too. You're drinking too. This is all just to, so he won't be mad. You felt scared that bringing up your reservations about moving in with him and about his drinking and his behavior, you were afraid of him. But what'd you end up doing? You ended up doing it all, right? He had a temper, and it was first directed at other people, but when he had a drink, he would direct it at me. Why does this sound like something that happened with your dad? So when you're dating anybody, this is for anybody listening, and you see them have a terrible temper at other people, whether it's road rage or animals or their mother or anything, like that is your red flag. People who show a temper with anybody, it's your red flag, and it's a big wake-up call that if they treat other people like that, if you're going to be their partner, you are definitely going to be in the line of fire. So with him, when he would drink, this anger side came out. I've known a lot of of alcoholics. Some of them are jolly, they just get really nice. Some of them get sleepy. Some of them get harmless. Some of them turn violent and horrible and rageful and say hurtful things. That's the worst kind. But you were primed for it in childhood to learn to trauma bond, right? So you said, I felt very lonely when I lived with him. Yeah, I bet. He'd call in the morning when he went to work and you'd feel rushed and pressured to answer. Okay, typical controlling behavior of an abuser, and you scared and answering the phone so that he won't get mad. Then you'd speak at lunch. You know what? That's a lot. Morning, lunch. Then he'd pick you up at the gym. This is somebody absolutely trying to inject themselves and control every aspect of your life. Our lives started to feel at one. I'm just going to say, no, it sounds enmeshed and controlled. That's not what oneness is like. You didn't have any autonomy. It felt codependent. And I'm not sure what you mean by that, but I would just define codependent as your whole identity ends up sort of located in another person and how they feel, and you forget who you are. And that sounds accurate. And you felt through the relationship that you had trauma bonded even from the first date. Yes, it does sound like that, trauma bond being that you know, it's like, oh, it's great, it's terrible, it's great, it's terrible. And then the result is that you're hooked in even harder than when you started. But it didn't feel like there was much substance there. Nope. I doubt myself because all I see are the negatives from it. Okay, there it is. There's the trauma bond thinking. I doubt myself because all I see are negatives. It's like, it sounds really negative. And if a person who's abusive and treats you so badly and controls your life is occasionally nice, and then you doubt yourself and say, oh, all I'm seeing is the negatives. When somebody's abusive and controlling, I would just say, focus 100% on the negatives, because the negatives are deal breakers. You want to put all your focus on that. It doesn't matter how nice they are in those other moments. That niceness counts for nothing if they turn around and they're abusive, like, oh, you know, they're nice except when they drink, they're abusive to me. That's not going to be happy for you. It's not love. And then this thing where you have to call them all the time and you're scared to not answer the phone. This is an abusive relationship. Yeah, God, I'm so sorry. Okay. He wasn't all bad. He was caring and showed up for me, especially when he didn't drink. So caring and showing up for somebody don't count if they're interrupted by somebody abandoning you, destroying you, tearing you down. Okay, so it changed when he drank. He would hate it if you were out and you would talk to friends and wouldn't be with him. Okay, again, super classic controlling, narcissistic behavior that culminates in abuse. You didn't mention whether there's violence. I sure wouldn't be. I'm almost surprised if there wasn't violence, and it would be leading there. Talking to me, he talked to you with snarled teeth and shouting at you in front of your friends. Oh, how humiliating. I'm so sorry. But I'm glad your friends saw it so your friends could give you a reality check. And I know you didn't really believe them at first, but they said they didn't feel he was right for you. That's a nice way of putting it. They saw him blow up again, and then they told you how they felt. And then your boyfriend said to you your worst fear and said that you are damaged goods. And that hurt you. Like, that was the thing that drove you away. And I'm actually really grateful that some part of you was intact enough and self-respecting enough to go, you know what? That's over the line, you know, damaged goods. Now, in one sense, look, every human being is damaged goods. But what you are is you're resilient goods. You're somebody where stuff happened to you when you were a kid and couldn't possibly control it, and yet you grew up. You love people. You work. You go to the gym. You have friends, right? So actually, you're a miracle. You're a miracle to have gone through the abuse you had as a kid and survived, and that here you are persevering, and you're watching my YouTube channel, which I'm honored, right? And you're writing to me, which is good. You're opening up the window, like, can I get some perspective here? I think this is like the most great thing possible. This is empowered goods. It changed then. He apologized, he tried to improve, but you were hurt, you couldn't get past it. Good. If that was the thing that did it, it sounds like there were many things before that could have been the thing, but if that's what did it, good, you got out. And yes, maybe it was like your parents' relationship. Yeah. We didn't have much to say because of the habitual way of communicating, and then you would drink and talk about trauma as your only bond. I can't think of any bigger downer, and how boring just drink and go, oh yeah, you know what happened to me? Yeah, me too. It was terrible. Like, I don't want that for you, James. I want you to have somebody who inspires you, where you have things to talk about that are uplifting and empowering and give you ideas. And that, by the way, is the sign of a relationship that is good, is that when you're with that person, it inspires you to take a step up. Not brings you down, not alienates you from your family and friends, but inspires you to do something you didn't think you could do before. That's a sign that it's a good relationship. So this is one of the things I want you to remember, is that even when your wounds have you trauma bonded and you want an external reference for, like, am I doing it again? Am I trauma bonding? Am I letting myself get walked all over? Ask yourself, have I become a better person as a result of this relationship? Do I find myself taking a step up in life? Am I proud of who I am with this person? Am I proud of this person when they're seen with me? Those are some, you could just like write those down and put them on sticky notes on your refrigerator, so that when your mind goes blank, which that's what happens with CPTSD, it's not your fault. It's like a physiological reaction to stress that develops during abuse when you're little, and you can't think straight when it's happening. That's how it happens, all right? So you write notes for yourself, and then you enlist your friends to know what your goals are and ask if they can help you when this stuff happens. You can text them when you're in the middle of it. I mean, I really hope you don't go back to this guy. All right. So what happened was, after a birthday, your friends and family all said their concerns, and they didn't think you should be with him. They saw a fight, and the fight happened because you mentioned an ex. Okay, classic abuser. Your boyfriend felt that you were ignoring all good things he did and that he wasn't being validated for all he did. Yeah, you know, maybe he has trauma, maybe he's just always looking for validation, but he's not going to get it through abuse. Nobody abusive is going to get validated. It's just going to be more pain and more pain and more pain. You know, and I hope he finds peace, but not with you. Not with you. This is a toxic combination here. And so then you went long distance and both sought out therapy. So the door was still open, but you had moved out. And then that brought up all the things from childhood. You started to really look at your CPTSD, and you said you started to dysregulate. So it started to get hard for you to keep your head together while you were looking at all of this. And yeah, I'm so glad you found me, because I teach people practical tips they can use, practical, tools, techniques, the daily practice you can use to re-regulate. And re-regulation doesn't either ruin your relationship or save your relationship. It helps you keep your head on while you figure your life out one way or another. You get to make mistakes, you get to have great things happen, but you get to learn to stay regulated while you do it. And the more you can learn to re-regulate, dysregulation, for anybody who's new to this, it's a brain state where you feel discombobulated, you kind of lose track of your values, your thinking, you can end up making impulsive mistakes. And that's what we do. And it's normal. But if you can learn, everybody gets dysregulated. People with CPTSD get dysregulated more often and have a harder time coming back. So that's what we do. We teach ourselves to come back from dysregulation and get re-regulated as quickly as possible and spend more time regulated so that we make fewer mistakes. We still make mistakes because we're human, but we recognize them faster and we're able to walk them back. That, combined with supportive people who understand what you're working on, who can help you when you're feeling confused, when you feel like you want to go back to a bad thing. Your friends can help you. And so you got withdrawn and depressed, yep, and you felt smothered by him, and you had thoughts of ending your life, and it had happened before, and that is a CPTSD thing too. And I think what happened here, I mean, this is the feeling I get from reading it, it's just, you were trying to negotiate with a terrorist, basically, someone who always puts you down, and some part of you was trying to save the day. And because that trauma part of you was, and that trauma bonded behavior was going in and still staying connected to the relationship, but everything in your soul was like, I'm going to die if I'm going to be here. I think that's a lot where the thoughts come from. And it's a cry for help to get out of that situation. And so thankfully, he ended it. How about that? How about that? Well, but you said during the break, you found clarity. You call it clarity. And then you realized, I want to be with him. Okay, that, James, is where your trauma bond CPTSD wound kicked in and told you some wrong information. You just told me this whole letter of this terrible, miserable time in your life where you had no autonomy, you weren't loved, there was no substance, This guy was controlling. He put you down in the worst possible way. And then when you had a break, you went, I'm the wrong one. I want to be with him. That is trauma bonding. It's not your fault. It's not because you're a bad person. It's not because you're dumb. It's because you have CPTSD, and it's because you're human. But I'm here. You wrote to me because I think you're throwing a lifeline. It's like, could somebody talk to me about what's really going on? And I'll just say, it's 100% clear. This is not a good relationship for you. It's abusive. And you have the potential to do something different. You're doing therapy right now. You're working on yourself. You're out of the abusive relationship right now. And what's happening is that lonely feeling, your parents, I have no doubt you have abandonment wounds. Those wounds kick in and they play tricks on your mind that at all costs, you have to do everything you can to not be alone. But that's not true. You can be very happy and alone. You have your friends. You have your job. You can also move somewhere better for you again. And you do not need to be in an abusive relationship to feel like you have somewhere to go, to feel like love is possible, or to feel like you have a home. But that's the challenge. When your home life was so hard, I think we're all looking for a place to call home. And for right now, it's going to be your own apartment. It's going to be your own apartment. And I'm going to really encourage you to make that apartment beautiful and comfortable, and to, in addition to your work, to fill your time with happy activities that you like. If you like, for example, colors in your apartment, I want you to spend a little of your budget on making your apartment beautiful the way you like it. I would love for you to have a really comfortable place to sit down. Buy some pillows if you need to. Get something to put your feet up. Treat yourself the way that you never got to be treated by somebody else. Start to send that message to that hurting soul inside that you matter, you're lovable, you're good, you get to have the good thing. And then when the day comes that you're going to be dating again, I'm going to suggest you go very slowly. I have a dating course you can take. You can take the whole course and do the worksheets in a few hours, but it'll teach you my strategy for how to get out of that trauma bond pattern and set yourself up with what I call guardrails and a structured dating plan, so you can proceed slowly and you can get to know somebody enough that if it turns out that they're the same old abusive type again, you're going to see it first before you're attached to them, before you've let them into your heart and all the old patterns kicked in. Because actually, when you can slowly get into a relationship with somebody you've taken the time to find out that they're pretty good, that relationship is something that calls you up and sort of brings you up to be a little bit better version of yourself. Having such a relationship can actually add to your healing, not take away from it. Because James, I'm telling you, I'm not trying to scare you, but if you keep having relationships where people mistreat you, it's like it takes a little bit out of you each time. It takes a little more, and it gets harder and harder to recover. So I think you told me you're 30 years old. That's great. All right, you have time to turn your ship around to in a better direction and eliminate people who are abusive. So you can write down, how would you know if somebody were abusive? What would be the signs they would have? What are the questions you could ask them? What are the circumstances that stress people out? If you look back to all the guys you've dated who turned out to be alcoholic, addicted, violent, abusive, whatever it was, cheating, what were the red flags that you couldn't see at the time, but when you look back, you see that they were there? Write those down. Write those down. You're going to start having this reference sheet where you remind yourself every day while dating, what is a red flag? What is a good sign? And for this, you really want your friends too. Also, James, you'd be most welcome in my dating coaching program if you want to check that out. There's links to everything down below in the description section. But I want you to have hope. I want you to have hope, and I want you to build up enough energy to conceive of this being a time when you shut the door on all the patterns of the past, and you begin to carve out a life where you get to become who you really are. Who you really are is good and lovable and deserving of kindness and peace at home and support. And I know it's easy for people to say that it's a whole different thing to kind of grow it inside. I'm going to say it anyway, James. I'm going to say it anyway. For whatever reason you wanted me to give you guidance, I'm going to tell you that's the truth. But to let it in, part of it is shedding the old behaviors, the old fears and resentments. My daily practice, I really encourage you to use that. If you end up on a Friday night and you don't have anywhere to go and you're feeling tempted to call this guy, you can take out your paper and use my daily practice to start getting those feelings out on paper. Out on paper. You will be amazed how much your emotional state can be like brought back to center. It can come back from that edge and that dark thinking that you shouldn't even live because some abusive guy is not in your life. No, 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 no. Those feelings, they go on paper. You ask for them to be removed. You take a rest in meditation, and usually what happens in your evening meditation is, you feel kind of sleepy. Maybe you watch a TV show. Maybe you, chat with somebody, text them or something, and then go to bed. It's a good night. It's a good night when you can heal and take your time to become the person who's ready to choose someone who loves you. All right? So I hope that helps. For everybody watching this, if you love this topic and you want to go a little deeper into it, I've got a video lined up. It's about people who mistreat you and why you might be clinging to them. It's right over here, and I will see you very soon.